Welcome back to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into the stack of articles, research, and notes you've shared with us today, pulling out the absolute essential insights.
Think of this as your fast track, really, to understanding a critical moment in recent political history.
And our topic is that incredibly intense period right after the June 2024 presidential debate. Specifically, what happened inside the Democratic Party that led to President Biden's withdrawal from the race.
Yeah, we've got material here that really takes you behind the scenes. It reveals the rapid sequence of events, the different perspectives, and just the immense pressures building up during this, well, tumultuous time.
So our mission is to make sense of exactly what happened as these sources lay it out, offering you a shortcut to being well-informed on a few weeks that, frankly, fundamentally reshaped the election. Okay, let's get into it.
So the sources are incredibly blunt about the debate performance itself. They really don't pull any punches.
No, they call it a bad night, even a debacle. Pretty strong language.
Right. And what's immediately fascinating is the contrast in the internal reaction. We see from these notes that senior leaders in the White House seem to try and downplay the severity, almost acted like it hadn't happened.
And that's where the disconnect really hit home for some aides, it seems. One White House official is quoted saying they felt completely gaslit.
Ew.
Yeah, adding, "Senior leadership has given us nothing. To act like it's business as usual is delusional." That paints a stark picture of the mood, doesn't it?
It really does. And it wasn't just, within the White House walls. There was also criticism from longtime Biden aides who felt that outside Davos Dem,
Connected types.
exactly, that they were too quick to hedge their bets against us and maybe get a bit hysterical right away.
Meanwhile, the core Biden team on the plane back, the material says they seem to fall back on dismissing the anxiety, just calling it just a bad night.
Which speaks to an initial posture of trying to contain the fallout, I guess. Or maybe just a slow realization of how big the problem really was.
Even an ally like Congresswoman Annie Kuster called it malpractice and joked about needing a positive COVID test just to avoid the debate in the first place. That kind of humor, it carries a real edge of despair,
Definitely. So how did President Biden himself first try to counter all this damage? The sources point to a speech in North Carolina.
The very next day, right?
Yes, this was the immediate response. The remarks were reportedly written overnight, and Biden used a teleprompter to directly address the concerns, the age, the physical stuff.
He said things like, "I know I'm not a young man, I don't walk as easy, and I don't debate as well as I used to," kind of leaning into it.
But he followed that by insisting he knew how to do the job and that the stakes were just too high not to run.
He stated, "I would not be running again if I didn't believe with all my heart and soul I can do this job."
But the sources highlight that this was increasingly at odds with the feeling among a growing number of Democratic officials who were starting to believe he could not do the job, or at least couldn't win.
And within the White House itself, there were clearly different views on the best way forward, weren't there?
Oh, absolutely. The former chief of staff, Ron Klain, was apparently pushing hard for immediate, unscripted engagement.
Rank what?
Klain felt Biden needed to be doing press conferences, interviews, meeting with key allies like the Progressive Caucus, basically ASAP.
Get him out there.
Yeah. And, the notes mention, Klain believed he had this unique ability to talk candidly with Biden because of their long relationship.
But Chief of Staff Jeff Zients, while agreeing Biden needed to get out there, he apparently rejected some of Klain's specific tactics.
Right, like meeting with progressives that very weekend. His argument was based on the president's schedule citing plans like a trip to Camp David, a photo shoot, practical stuff maybe.
But Klain was reportedly very disappointed by this.
Yeah, he felt that hunkering down with the family was not what Biden needed right then. It kind of reveals a tension, doesn't it, between strategic urgency and maybe protecting the president's time, which some saw as isolating him.
Okay, so while that internal debate was playing out, the disquiet among Democrats across the country was just growing rapidly.
And the sources show this was really widespread. House Leader Hakeem Jeffries was hearing from concerned members everywhere.
From who specifically?
From the moderate blue dogs, the more conservative-leaning Democrats, all the way to most House Democrats, really. His strategy was reportedly maximum engagement, just listening to everyone, but initially keeping his own opinion private.
Smart politics, maybe? What about the Senate?
Oh, senators' phones were just blowing up. That's the quote. Panicked calls.
I bet.
Senator Chuck Schumer was hearing these concerns too, but initially advised his colleagues against going public.
Why? Wouldn't that send a message?
Well, Schumer's reasoning, as the notes describe it, was that if senators went public too early, Biden would get his back up and potentially dig in even harder. He felt the air needed to clear.
Okay.
And crucially, they needed the post-debate polling to come in and show the stark reality of the situation. Data, not just panic.
Got it. Meanwhile, Senator Mark Warner was actively trying to pull together a group of senators to meet with Biden.
Yeah, the intention there, according to the material, was to express appreciation, respect, but also make it clear they didn't think he could win. A tough conversation.
Very tough. Was Warner himself willing to go public?
Apparently hesitant. He reportedly felt it would make him look hypocritical, comparing it to how Republican senators handled Donald Trump's controversies.
That's interesting.
He also noted the influx of what he called fantasy football ideas for a replacement process coming from anxious donors. Everyone suddenly had a plan.
But some couldn't wait for polls or meetings? Right. Congressman Lloyd Doggett.
Right. He saw the debate performance as evidence of a debilitating turn for the worse. Immediately told colleagues, we need a new candidate.
And the reaction?
The sources say he met no pushback at all. That's telling.
Wow.
Doggett tried to call the White House first, unsuccessfully, to ask Biden to step aside privately. When that didn't happen, he decided he had to be the first elected official to go public.
And Congressman Adam Smith, another voice.
Yeah, he put the blame squarely on Biden for running in the first place.
Yeah.
Told White House staff point blank, he's got to step aside. Just direct.
And this wasn't just happening behind closed doors. Public criticism started bubbling up, too.
Yeah, prominently. Like the New York Times editorial board calling for Biden to leave the race.
That's huge.
And urging the party to deal truthfully with the public by creating a process for someone more capable.
And then Thomas Friedman, the NYT columnist,
described the debate as a heartbreaking moment, stating it revealed Biden has no business running for re-election and clearly is not any longer up to the job. Very direct criticism.
So, amidst all this mounting pressure, what was the initial campaign response, apart from trying to downplay it?
Well, the notes capture a memo from Deputy Campaign Manager Rob Flaherty attacking the bedwetting brigade. So, pushing back hard. Yeah. But meanwhile, campaign staff themselves were reportedly waiting frustrated for some kind of plan to show Biden performing well, asking internally, where's the plan? Why is he silent? We're getting killed.
This really underscores that significant disconnect you mentioned earlier, the White House inner circle versus the growing panic in the broader party ranks.
Absolutely. The sources portray the Biden team's initial reaction as almost acting like it was just another bump in the road.
Which seems unrealistic given the reaction.
Right. And some key staff even retreated or went on vacation right after the debate.
Vacation? Seriously?
That's what the notes say. The White House is described as being in a full defensive crouch, and they were slow to realize that their own staff were also having serious second thoughts about Biden's fitness.
So Jeff Zients held an all-staff call, tried to rally the troops.
Yeah, trying to frame the debate as just one night and emphasizing that Biden was a great president, urging staff to keep their head down, keep working.
But inside the White House, there was a strong consensus against an open primary process, right? They saw that as a disaster.
Definitely. Which is quite interesting because it contrasts with private views from figures like Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi, who, according to these sources, actually favored some sort of process to allow for a different candidate.
So Obama and Pelosi were thinking about alternatives even then.
The sources suggest they were open to exploring it, yes. Privately, at least.
And Senator Schumer's frustration with the inner circle, Donilon and Ricchetti?
Palpable, yeah. The notes capture him privately calling them the Palace Guard. He felt they were in complete denial.
Believing one speech could fix it.
Exactly. He felt they thought a single speech would be an elixir. His team reportedly had to tell the White House, no, you need to call every single one of the Democratic senators because the concerns were that widespread.
So the sources kind of break down Senate Democrats into camps.
Roughly three, yeah. Those who wanted Biden out immediately, those loyalists who would stick with him, and then a significant group in the middle.
The middle group being?
Those who saw him as suboptimal, maybe couldn't win, but were really unsure or uncomfortable with the whole process required to replace him. How would that even work without chaos?
Right. And Senator Warner's frustration comes up again here.
Yeah, with the fantasy football ideas for a process, but also his growing belief that Vice President Harris would ultimately have to be the nominee.
Why Harris specifically, in his view?
Part of that reasoning, according to the material, was the crucial loyalty she held with African-American voters, a key Democratic constituency you absolutely couldn't afford to alienate.
Okay, so in the face of all this escalating concern, the internal disagreements, the White House and campaign did try to reassure people, right? Put Biden out there.
Yes, they certainly tried. Different settings, trying to demonstrate his capacity. But according to the sources, these efforts often seem to backfire, or at least they didn't really effectively counter the concerns.
Like the event in Philadelphia.
Yeah, that's mentioned. The sources noted Biden rambled and lost his train of thought during a Q&A, even needed help to sit down. An aide reportedly thought he just looked like he needed to go home.
That's rough.
And there's a really striking, candid account from a campaign advisor on Air Force One, thinking privately that Biden can't form a fucking sentence.
Oh.
Looked tired and weak, and concluded, we can't live in this purgatory. They were also reportedly getting worried about campaign funding drying up at that point, too.
Even Chris Coons, who's known as a deeply loyal Biden supporter.
Right, even while defending him publicly on CNN. He was quoted urging the White House behind the scenes to schedule press conferences or interviews. Basically, prove Biden's acuity. Show, don't just tell.
And Biden did some radio shows aimed at black audiences.
He did. But one notable moment highlighted in the sources was a pretty significant misspeak, where he referred to himself as the first black woman VP. And the sources also note that the campaign reportedly fed questions to the host for a pre-recorded segment. Now, the intention was likely to ensure a smooth performance, right?
Sure. Control the message.
But you could argue it undermined the goal of demonstrating unscripted capability. It looks managed.
So these controlled attempts were happening, but they were being contrasted with other events and observations fueling the concerns, like Congressman Seth Moulton.
Yeah, his detailed observations are mentioned, suggesting he perceived a deterioration in Biden over time, going back months, even to September 2023.
So for him, the debate wasn't a one-off.
Exactly. Moulton's view was that the debate disaster was not a surprise, given what he felt he'd been seeing. The sources even mention this dark humor circulating among Democrats about needing to replace Biden with someone needing more energy, maybe like a politician weeks away from death. It's a bleak joke, but it reflects real anxiety.
Yikes. And the First Lady's Vogue cover story, that caused some friction, too.
It seems so. It included a post-debate note of defiance. We'll decide our future. We'll not let those 90 minutes define the 4 years. But that struck some longtime aides as tone-deaf. And a terrible look, given the circumstances.
Tone-deaf how?
Maybe just not acknowledging the depth of the concern. Projecting confidence when the party felt anything but.
And Senator Debbie Stabenow reportedly had a private conversation with the First Lady.
Yes, sharing senators' concerns and asking point blank if something more was going on with the president's health. A direct question.
And the answer.
The First Lady apparently didn't answer, but later fumed about being asked. Suggests sensitivity, maybe a protectiveness.
And Congressman Jim Clyburn, a key figure.
He reportedly heard from members who hadn't seen the president in person in over a year.
A whole year?
Yeah. He interpreted this as evidence of the White House team isolating the president. The White House explanation pointed to scheduling limits, sure, but also acknowledged, according to these notes, that they were hiding what was happening as much as they could.
Hiding it. That's a strong phrase.
It really is. So with this mounting evidence, the counter efforts not really landing, the pressure just reached a tipping point. This is when the public calls for withdrawal from elected officials really started gaining steam.
And the sources pinpoint Congressman Lloyd Doggett as the first domino to fall publicly.
Correct. He issued that statement, referencing Lyndon Johnson's decision not to run again, explicitly calling for Biden to withdraw.
Congressman Mike Quigley came close, too.
Reportedly very close, reflecting later on the disaster that seemed to be unfolding.
And Adam Smith again, this time giving Zients a deadline.
Yeah, telling Zients he was going public soon, calling for Biden to step aside, stating it had become clear he is not the best person to lead the ticket. Very direct pressure.
By early July, Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill made her statement,
arguing the stakes are too high to stay silent, calling for Biden to declare that he won't run. She was reportedly the 9th House Democrat to do so publicly.
Then Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey weighed in,
urging Biden to carefully evaluate whether he remains our best hope. Carefully worded, but the message was clear.
And then a senator finally broke ranks publicly.
Senator Peter Welch, the first Democratic senator to publicly call for him to step down. Another senator privately described that move as significant and helpful. It broke the dam in the Senate.
And it wasn't just politicians. Prominent figures outside politics started speaking up, too.
Right, like Hollywood producer Damon Lindelof proposing a dembargo, basically, withholding donations to Democrats until Biden left the ticket, hitting them where it hurts.
And other donors followed suit. Bill Harris, Reed Hastings.
Yeah, publicly stating Biden should exit. Hastings was very direct, saying Biden was in denial about his mental state. And the sources note this had a very real impact on fundraising. Campaign payroll became uncertain.
Money talks.
Always.
The sources also give a really detailed look at George Clooney's journey to writing that big op-ed.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Initially, he tried to compartmentalize his concerns, but the debate reportedly just confirmed his worst fears.
What pushed him over the edge?
Hearing from panicking Democrats, and even Senator Joe Manchin apparently telling him Biden had lost the will to fight, that seems to have solidified his view. He decided to write the op-ed after Biden issued that letter insisting he was staying in.
Dude, I'm not going anywhere letter.
Exactly. Clooney's op-ed, "I love Joe Biden, but we need a new nominee," stated point blank that Biden couldn't win the fight against time.
He noted a change in Biden?
Yeah, since 2010, even since 2020.
Yeah.
And crucially, he argued this wasn't just his view, but the private view of every Democratic senator, Congress member, and governor he had spoken to.
Every single one. That's a bold claim.
A very bold claim.
Yeah.
And he advocated for a process with other candidates.
What was the reaction to Clooney's piece?
Intense. Jeffrey Katzenberg, a huge Biden fundraiser and ally, was reportedly skeptical, thought it was harsh, premature, disagreed with Clooney's assessment based on a recent fundraiser.
But the White House?
Furious. Especially Steve Ricchetti, who reportedly threatened to shut him down. Really strong reaction.
So, despite this incredibly public, mounting pressure from all sides, politicians, donors, celebrities, the White House seemed to be digging in its heels, resisting.
Yes. That Biden letter stating, "It's time for it to end," and "I'm not going anywhere," trying to frame his nomination as already decided by the primary votes.
Which Clooney felt wasn't true about the process being open.
Right. And Senator Schumer's very blunt interpretation of that letter is captured in the notes as, "I'm running, go fuck yourselves."
Doesn't get much clearer than that.
So the Biden team reportedly launched an aggressive campaign to thwart any possible attacks. A full-court press on senators.
Did that work?
It seems to have had some effect. It left figures like Mark Warner feeling horrible, but it contributed to their decision to stay silent publicly, partly pressure, partly that hypocrisy comparison with the GOP again.
The material also details debates within normally loyal groups, like the Congressional Black Caucus.
Yeah, a meeting where members debated staying with Biden. An argument reportedly raised was that if Harris became the nominee and lost, the blame would disproportionately fall on black people.
That's a heavy consideration.
But there was also a sense, even in that debate, that realistically, only Harris could be the alternative candidate who could potentially unite the party base.
And Congressman Pete Aguilar, as House Caucus Chair, he played a key role in relaying concerns.
He did. He took the House Democrats' worries directly to Steve Ricchetti. But initially, Ricchetti reportedly just dismissed the severity.
Saying what?
Things like, "First time I'm hearing that it's this bad," and insisting Biden is an asset, not a liability. Just wasn't seeing it or wasn't admitting it.
But Aguilar pushed back.
He did. He asked Ricchetti what seems like a pivotal question. Has anyone walked into the Oval and told him we could lose everything?
And Ricchetti's answer.
According to the sources, Ricchetti admitted no.
Wow. No one told the president directly.
That's what Ricchetti seemingly admitted to Aguilar. And this led Aguilar to realize that Biden might simply not be getting the full, unvarnished truth from his inner circle.
Which highlights the importance of these key meetings where allies tried to break through that bubble. Nancy Pelosi's meeting.
Right. She met with Biden, asked what data specifically showed the race was still winnable. This led to a follow-up call with Mike Donilon.
Donilon being the strategist. What was his argument?
The usual, it seems. Polling competitive, within margin of error, summer polls aren't predictive, we can still win. Standard campaign talk, maybe?
But Pelosi wasn't buying it.
She pushed back, asked to see data from other pollsters, not just the campaign's internal ones, and raised specific concerns about young voters not turning out. Later, the White House was reportedly furious about her public comments on Morning Joe.
What did she say?
Things like, it was up to the president to decide, but also that time is running short. The White House apparently thought they were starting to turn the tide until she said that publicly.
And Senator Schumer took an even stronger stance, didn't he? Demanding a meeting.
Yeah, demanding that Donilon, Ricchetti, and Anita Dunn, his palace guard, meet directly with the Senate Democrats. He reportedly threatened a letter signed by 10 senators if they refused. He forced the issue.
And that meeting happened. How did it go?
Described as having a weird, grim energy. Donlin gave his presentation on electability, but the senators apparently just unloaded with blunt feedback.
Like what? Give us some examples from the notes.
Okay, Senator Patty Murray reportedly talked about Biden ruining his legacy. Senator Jack Reed suggested an examination by 2 independent neurologists.
Whoa.
Senator Joe Manchin used the analogy of needing to take away the car keys. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse said they'd be lying to the public if they kept vouching for Biden. Even Senator Chris Coons, the loyalist, spoke about the difficult bind between loyalty and honesty.
And Senator Fetterman pulled the room.
Yeah, apparently asked for a show of hands or something, and only about 5 senators were still squarely with the president.
Yeah.
Fetterman defended Biden passionately, but acknowledged the reality of the room.
It was a really tough meeting for the Palace Guard.
Extremely tough. Then there were the Zoom calls with House Democrats, which sound equally contentious.
The Progressive Caucus call.
Biden was described as defensive and angry, insisting he was the real progressive. He reportedly even read a text message out loud that a staffer sent him during the call, telling him stay positive, you are sounding defensive.
Reading the stage directions out loud, that's not ideal.
Not ideal. Sources called that call insane, complete defensive mode, strange and rambling, long-winded, and at times incoherent.
And the new Democrat coalition call, the moderates.
Also difficult. Congresswoman Annie Kuster reportedly prepared her remarks, feeling like she was discussing assisted living. That tells you the mindset.
What did she ask?
She asked Biden bluntly how he would make his decision and if he was getting an honest assessment of the situation.
How did Biden react?
With annoyance, apparently.
Oh.
Like Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino is the description used. He insisted polling was fine, dismissed national security concerns as dead wrong.
He got personal, too.
Yeah, with Congressman Jason Crow referencing his son's Bronze Star in comparison to Crow's service, telling them all to just talk about his achievements. He reportedly concluded, I don't want to hear that crap.
And the reaction on the call.
Just, oh, fuck. That's the quote. Custer's conclusion afterwards was stark. Can't get out there and say 4 more years. Don't know if we can say 4 more months.
That's devastating. Which brings us to maybe the most crucial meeting detailed in these sources. Schumer's one-on-one with Biden and Rehoboth, July 13th.
Yeah, this seems like the absolute turning point conversation. Schumer reportedly prepared extensively, brought notes.
How did it start?
Initially friendly, apparently. But then Schumer pivoted. He gave Biden the readout from that grim Senate meeting, told Biden he was surprised himself by how bad the sentiment was.
Then came the hammer.
His blunt assessment. If there was a secret ballot in the Senate right then, Biden would only get 5 votes. And he added, you know how good I am at counting votes.
He knows how to count.
He does. Then Schumer apparently getting more philosophical, talking about legacy, warning Biden that losing the election would make his legacy one of the darkest figures in American history. Heavy stuff.
And crucially, Schumer told Biden he wasn't getting the truth.
Directly. Said he wasn't getting the real information from his staff. He told Biden he'd spoken to his pollsters, the Senate campaign pollsters, and they put the chances of winning at only 5%. An analytics guy reportedly said 1%.
1%. That's basically zero.
Pretty much. He urged Biden not to run. Biden then asked the key question, can Harris win?
And Schumer's response.
Reportedly, I don't know if she can win. I just know that you cannot. Brutally honest.
Wow. How did Biden take it?
He reportedly asked for a week to decide. And as Schumer left, Biden reportedly put his hands on his shoulders and said, you have bigger balls than anyone I've ever met.
High praise, in a way.
In a way. The sources note Schumer teared up later when relaying this conversation. It clearly took a massive emotional toll.
And this all happened the same day as the Trump assassination attempt.
The very same day. Which campaign aides immediately saw as politically beneficial for Trump, reportedly reacting with, fuck, just a convergence of massive events.
So after Schumer's visit, the campaign pollsters made one last push.
Seems like it. A final, desperate attempt to convey the stark reality. But this time just to the senior staff, not the president directly. They had a rescheduled briefing on July 18th.
What did they present?
Battleground data showed Biden behind in every key state. Close races in places that should have been safe, like Minnesota, New Mexico, Virginia. Big challenges with young voters.
And the age issue.
They called it devastating and a settled question. Said the reassurance messages just weren't working anymore. The public had made up its mind on that.
What was the overall message?
Basically, we don't see a path, but it's your call. Deferential, but clear.
How did Donilon react to that?
Reportedly, very curtly, just, I look forward to reviewing your data, not engaging with the conclusion.
And there was a tense call between Richetti and one of the pollsters.
Yeah, on July 20th, Richetti reportedly called pollster Jeff Garin out of line, threatened to fire the pollsters, and insisted Donnellan had reached a different conclusion from the same data, still pushing back.
Just incredible denial, or maybe just trying to protect the boss.
Hard to say definitively from the outside. Around this time, too, Jeffrey Katzenberg reportedly visited Biden in Vegas.
How did Biden seem then?
Katzenberg found him looking awful, apparently with COVID symptoms. After Katzenberg pitched some high-risk strategy, Biden's positive COVID test was abruptly announced, and he rushed off.
And the cool reporter noted something.
Yeah, observed Biden had a pronounced shuffle and difficulty getting into the car that day. More visual evidence fueling concerns.
And finally, Chris Coons made one last call.
Yeah, a deeply personal one from Colorado. Expressed unwavering loyalty, but stated he couldn't honestly say it was in the country's best interest for Biden to continue.
He shared a text message
From his friend Billy from the IBEW, urging Biden to step back and do the right thing for the USA, bringing in the voice of a regular working person.
So all of this pressure, the data, the blunt conversations, it all led to the final decision point.
Exactly. The sources bring us to the final meeting between Donnellan, Richetti, and Biden on July 20th in Rehoboth. Just those three.
And Donnellan still argued he could win.
Reportedly, yes. Continued to argue the polling wasn't catastrophic. Down maybe 3 to 5 points, could reach a dead heat again by Labor Day. Implicitly disagreeing with the pollsters' no-path conclusion.
What was Richetti's summary?
He laid out the political dynamic. Yeah, the CDC and progressives were mostly still loyal, but about 2/3 of House and Senate Democrats were now pushing him to drop out. The insider momentum was spinning out of control. Couldn't ignore it.
But the key part of this meeting, according to the material, was assessing the cost of staying in, right? Even if winning was somehow possible.
That seems to be the core of it. They reportedly described the path forward as a turbulent month, facing continuing disaffection, a split party, major difficulty raising money, needing allies to fight tooth and nail, while Biden himself was sick with COVID.
Getting personal. Nasty.
Yeah, potentially threatening to tear the Democratic Party apart.
So the choice presented, as sources interpret it, was maybe you could win, but it would be scorched earth, and you wouldn't be beloved afterwards. Your legacy would be tarnished by the fight itself.
And this is where Biden's own reaction, as captured in the notes, becomes the defining moment. He reportedly expressed deep worry about that split party, worried the campaign would only be about his age, not about the threat Trump posed.
And his conclusion.
Reportedly, that's not who I am. And critically, we need a unified party.
So the decision was made.
And with that, the sources state he was going to bow out. Donnellan reportedly prepared a withdrawal letter for the next day, but advised Biden to sleep on it one last night to be sure.
And the source material ends right there, basically, on the cusp of the announcement.
Pretty much. It mentions July 21st, Joe Manchin publicly calling for Biden to drop out, Jim Clyburn about to go on CNN's State of the Union, sensing something big was about to happen. The news was imminent.
So this deep dive, it's really pulled back the curtain on an incredibly intense few weeks. The internal struggle, the conflicting pressures, the data, the very real disagreements, even among the closest allies.
Yeah, it wasn't just about the debate performance itself, was it? These sources show how that one night brought all these underlying concerns, age, polling, electability, to a head. It forced conversations that maybe had been avoided or, downplayed for too long.
Understanding this rapid sequence, these behind-the-scenes moments, it really helps illuminate how major political decisions sometimes get made. It's not always neat or orderly.
No, often it's under immense pressure with significant disagreement, trying to balance personal loyalty against these stark political and electoral realities.
It definitely leaves you with a powerful question to consider based on these accounts. Given the conflicting data from different advisors, the deep personal loyalty involved, the perceived stakes for democracy, for the party, what would you prioritize if you were faced with a decision like that?
Your own conviction, the advice of allies, the cold, hard data, the cost to party unity.
Yeah. What weighs most heavily? Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about.